And now, Deep PED Thoughts with Old Jaker.
Media grade versus receptor grade, a world of difference. What do people experience with media grade LR3? Well, I've used it myself. I've given a couple different companies a run, but it was back, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. And the results that I had were very much in line with what you could expect from insulin. Say a medium acting insulin like Jubilant. So I made the dumb assumption that that's just what LR3 did. I figured receptor grade was just good quality version of media grade. Now, the thought with media grade is that it will not fit in the receptor, and I've always said that. But what I didn't understand is, if it won't fit in the receptor, then how does receptor grade fit into the receptor? Well, I don't think that it does. Now, that's not to say that receptor grade doesn't have a purpose, but receptor grade IGF-1 stimulates more of the results that we would think about with an MGF. And before you say, oh, that's ridiculous, let me explain to you what MGF is. MGF is simply an isoform of IGF-1. In fact, IGF-1 is just simply its own isoform. IGF-1, as we think about it, the 70 amino acid regular IGF-1 is IGF-1EA. MGF is IGF-1EB. Not much difference, but very different in effect. So when you talk about IGF-1 LR3, we're not even in the same realm as IGF-1EA or IGF-1EB. We are onto something completely different. What I expected, just by hearing the name, was an IGF-1 LR3 receptor grade, if it was to work effectively as intended, would work similarly to the results that people get with Increlex. If you don't know what Increlex is a 70 amino acid IGF-1 bioidentical receptor grade in large quantities in a slow dissolving, essentially a light hydrogel that lasts about 6 hours, 5.8 hour half-life in your system versus 2 to 8 minutes, half an hour, etc. with regular IGF-1 or 2 hours with LR3. So now looking back, I realize how foolish it was to expect an 83 amino acid sequence to strictly fall in line with the actions of what we typically think of as IGF-1. Now the difference is IGF-1, as we typically think about it, as we classify it on the greater, the collective unconscious of the bodybuilding community, is the anabolic or hypertrophic side of the equation. IGF-1EB or MGF, mechanogrowth factor, is the activating side of it. So when Dave Palumbo talks about you need to use growth hormone for a long time to activate satellite cells, what he's talking about is the pathway to MGF production, which activates muscle satellite stem cells, but it does not grow them. The IGF-1EA that we think of is what would grow them if you could get a legitimate IGF-1EA, and it would take long enough in your system to have an effect. As we've discovered with oxytocin, length of release makes all the difference in anabolism. For an anabolic property, just think about Anavar versus, say, a DECA injection, and how long each lasts in your system. 8 hours versus what? 5 days? Which one is more anabolic? Which one is more hypertrophic, even if you went dose for dose? The DECA is going to be, and there's other factors, obviously, but my point is, length of exposure matters. If you're only exposing your body to something for 1/3 of the day, you're leaving out 2/3 of the growth period. So if you could get regular IGF-1, say, as Increlex, or an Increlex copy, like, what's the one that's, Insubolic. It is an bioidentical IGF-1, likely not receptor grade, but I don't think it matters when we're talking about 70 amino acids for a 7 amino acid receptor. I think we're kind of automatically receptor grade if it's a high enough purity. It's close enough for rock and roll, right? So when people take this, they get similar results that they get with Increlex. The difference is the bottle of Insubolic has 5 milligrams of IGF-1 bioidentical, and Increlex has 40 milligrams. So that's one of the reasons why Increlex is so expensive. There's a massive amount of product in it. Now, back to IGF-1 LR3 receptor grade. What is it doing? Well, very specifically, it is not having the hypertrophic effects that we would expect. What it's having is actually kind of some sluggishness. The weights feel heavier, not lighter. If it was having the same effect as LR3 media grade, it would be acting like an insulin, storing more nutrients in the muscle, and the weights would actually feel lighter. So that's not happening here. So we know that it's doing something other than an insulin-like activity. So if I were you, I would never buy IGF-1 LR3 media grade. If I was so inclined to use something that would have the same effects, I would just go to Walmart and buy Novolin. That said, we do know that a receptor grade is having different effects. So I don't think that it's attaching to the IGF-1 EA receptor at all, if we're not having any anabolic or hypertrophic effects. I do think that it is stimulating the MGF receptor, which is very similar, which is just IGF-1 EB. I believe it acts similar to what like a precursor would do, to where we're taking it and it's asking for MGF to be produced. I think it's stimulating that is what's happening. And that's where the sluggishness comes from. If you were taking a drug that was depleting your methyl donor stores in your body, or you were not producing enough, or you didn't have enough of the enzyme to produce that, your body would feel weird after a while because you would need those methyl donors to calm you back down and put you into a normal balanced state. I think the same thing is happening here, to where it's calling on the body and taxing the body to make MGF to activate those satellite cells, and we're feeling tired. They say that when you take straight MGF, not PEG, it will alleviate those symptoms, and thanks to you-know-who for pointing all of this out, by the way. So that tells me that the MGF itself is acting as if you had taken a methyl donor in another situation or some other thing that your body is starving for. It's stimulating the need for production of MGF by awakening those satellite cells. When you take a shot of MGF, it's satisfying that temporarily and allowing the muscles to continue to do what they would do normally. But I don't think it's probably making a huge effect system-wide when you take MGF on top of it. I'm just saying it relieves the symptoms, okay? I don't have experience right here, so I'm not going to say for sure. Now, where does all this fit in to my plan? Well, I'm not going to use this for the LR receptor grade, read the anabolic side of it, for the hypertrophic side of it, as I was planning. Now I'm going to adjust my approach and use this post-fast to get my body ready for that hypertrophic phase. So I'm currently working my way into a fast. I will do that for about 2 weeks. When I come out of that, I will slowly start to eat again, and that's when I'll introduce the IGF-1 LR3 receptor grade. I expect to feel tired and sluggish. I feel tired and sluggish after ending a fast, to be honest with you. Your body is getting used to eating again, so it'll probably feel like crap. So I'll be introducing some NAD plus into the equation to see if that helps, along with some methyl donors for energy. And we'll see what happens. Don't forget NAD plus. It's very supportive to muscle growth and to changes that are happening in your body. Those changes will happen a lot easier if you have enough of it in your system. So that applies to anabolics, that applies to fat loss, all kinds of things that makes your body basically feel and act like it was younger while it's in your system and while you have plenty of it. So something to keep in mind for your cycles. So what I'll do is use this for about 2 weeks leading up to my growth phase. So I've already fasted for 2 weeks, keto for a week prior to that. So I got 3 weeks of being hard on my body, trying to wake up some of those satellite cells, and then I'm going to introduce the receptor grade chemical to wake up more of the satellite cells, and then we're going to go ahead and hit oxytocin slow release again and see what it has as an effect to plump everything up that we've just activated. So there's a training program that goes along with this very loosely, but I'll be ramping up the volume essentially little bit as I go right before the anabolic phase. Then I'll slowly, as I do the anabolic phase, take that training volume down little by little, possibly by raising the weights and the intensity at the same time and giving more recovery time. So just something to think about. And the people that are really into these peptides and stuff and really have been playing with them for a while and getting results, this is their take too. This is how they experience it. It's not what you would expect. It's not magic. It's not whatever. It's a little more subtle, a little disappointing to some, but if you realize what you're doing, you're stocking the shelves for a muscle feast to follow.